Hello, my friends. I'm so happy to see you today. I'm going to come at you with some personal stuff. I am in a state of overwhelm. Like the past 3 days, I would say, sleepless nights, waking up in the middle of the night, just feeling paralyzed about what's happening. And I don't often share that kind of stuff when I come on here, but I think that I know that it's not a feeling that I alone feel. So I wanted to share with you how I'm literally getting myself out of it at this exact moment. And I'm also thinking about all of the parents who are also caregivers or have a child who is going through something difficult or are in just a really busy phase of your life. It can all be really overwhelming. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is the Mel Robbins podcast, and I re-listened to one of her episodes. I think it was from March of 2023. And she talks about the two different types of overwhelm. She talks about lifestyle overwhelm and legitimate overwhelm. And like legitimate overwhelm is when you are literally managing so many different things from jobs, getting kids to school, managing doctor's appointments, like all of those things that so many parents who listen to this episode feel. And then there's lifestyle overwhelm. And I would say right now I'm coming at it with like a personal mix of two. I have legitimate overwhelm. Like I'm working a full-time job. Preston works a full-time job. Our kids are in school and activity and building a company, and I'm trying to sell the Support Spot app to hospitals. I'm trying to market to parents. Like it is legitimate overwhelm. There's a lot going on. But then I also get this like little sprinkle of lifestyle overwhelm, which comes, I think, from just my anxiety. And like for me, like Preston and I got into it last night because the house wasn't clean and I was having a migraine and I didn't feel like he was doing enough to help me manage the house. And like I picked a fight with him, and that just came from overwhelm for sure. So one of the things she said to do was she recommends finding a blank sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be in a planner or be in the perfect place. Like get a blank sheet of paper and start brain dumping all of the things that you have to do. And it might take a second, but then they're going to start flooding out. Like I just wrote down a list of 20 different things that I need to do. And she said, some of these things need to get done today. And those are the things you need to highlight. And she only wants you to highlight 3 things to get done today. So I had to go find a highlighter, but I did. I'll show it to you. I've got my highlighter, I've got my pen, and these are the things I'm actively doing to try to get out of this state of just feeling paralyzed. So I did that. One of the things I had to do was record this intro for this podcast today. So I'm doing it. I'm getting out of the overwhelm right now. So you write down all the things you have to do. You highlight the 3 most important things to do, and then you just start with those 3. And the rest you'll find out are just not as important, or maybe they can wait till another time, or maybe because you tackled your 3, you can start getting those other things done. So I just wanted to share that little tip with you because it really helped me today. Also, hi, if you're joining us for the first time, I'm Katie. I'm a child life specialist. I have been for 14 years. If you found yourself here at this podcast, it's because you care about kids and parents in the healthcare space, or you are a parent in the healthcare space. We share stories from other parents who have walked the path before so that you can learn from what they have been through. You can essentially get like that insight into what their experience was like to help you. So today I get to talk with Ale or Alessandra. She lives in Denmark, but she actually gave birth in France, in a foreign country where she lived, but she didn't speak the language fully. So it was very interesting to talk with her about communicating with the care team while living abroad in a place that she hadn't lived before, speaking a language that she didn't speak. We also talk about how like in those trench moments, like when you're literally in it, the things you do to survive and get through day to day, you can end up practicing for longer than they need to be. And she specifically talks about like tracking and note taking. Like eventually after she came out of the trenches, she was continuing to do that practice, but it was no longer serving her in the way it did in the beginning. So learning to let go of those things is really important. I really admire Ale. Her son had a NICU experience, and she was immediately in tune to how preparing and narrating his care even as an infant, was making it better for her, but then also preparing her son. It's something that she's practiced now because she's done it since he was a baby. He was having breath holding spells, and she was literally telling him, "You're having a breath holding spell. I'm here with you. You're safe." And it was a strategy that worked for her and has also practiced now that her son is getting older. And because of that, she founded PrepMeKids, which are the most beautiful, customizable books to prepare kids for medical experiences. I've been honored to collaborate and just give some 2 cents about kind of the clinical perspective, but she has done this all and it is just beautiful. So I'll let her get to talking about that too. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. Let's get started. For those of you who are joining us today, I am not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am a child life specialist. And the suggestions and tips and resources that I talk about with parents on this podcast may be great for you and they may not be right for you. So, the most important person you can talk to about getting support is your care team, your doctor who knows your story and your child's story. So, regardless of maybe what I mention or what other families mention here, we're not licensed therapists, we're not doctors. We're having a conversation about what the parenting journey has been like. So, please keep that in mind as you listen today. As a parent, you want to be there for your child, especially when it comes to their health. But healthcare can be overwhelming and confusing. The good news is child life specialists are experts who help families navigate these challenges. But often our support is only in hospitals. So imagine if you had access to these valuable tools and resources all the time. You would be able to understand medical procedures, explain them to your child, and help them feel less anxious, which also makes you probably feel less anxious. So when your child visits the doctor, has surgery, or has a medical procedure, having the right information and support can make all the difference. You, the parent, can be prepared to answer their questions, calm their fears, and advocate for their needs. Child Life Specialist tools are ready to be in your hands right now through our app Support Spot. All you have to do is go to the iOS or Android store, type in Support Spot. We are giving all of our listeners on this podcast access to the app for just $19.99 for an entire year. You are going to have, I'm not kidding, 7 years worth of resources and support and information that we have been building at Child Life on Call at your fingertips. With these tools in your pocket, you can transform the way your family experiences medical care. Parents, you deserve to be informed and feel confident in your child's healthcare journey. And by having access to Support Spot, you can ensure that your child feels supported and understood no matter what medical challenges come your way. Head to the link in the show notes or go to your app store, type in Support Spot to download it today. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here.
My name is Alessandra. I'm married to Alexandre, and we met in the US in undergrad, and we live in Denmark in Europe now. He's French Lebanese, and I grew up in Venezuela. So we're a bit of a mix, and we've lived in different countries and cities. And we welcomed our son Sebastian in 2019 while we were living in France. And I would say that because of the challenges that we experienced is how you and I connected, because I started working on a project called PrepMeKids, which is geared to children that have surgeries or illnesses, and their personalized books to help prepare them for those scenarios. We found that with our medical challenges, which we'll discuss shortly, that preparation was key in minimizing them, but also for all of our sanity. And that's kind of how the concept came to be. But I can talk about that a little bit later as well.
Yeah. You bring such a worldview to the table of what healthcare looks like in different, spots of the world. And I think that adds so much. For me, like what I love about what you're creating and what you're building at Prep Me Kids is you see the benefit and you feel the benefit of preparation and education for kids, regardless of where you live in the world. It's just kind of that it's that suggestion that piece of the puzzle that can actually make a difference for families, and that's what you're building on.
Absolutely. I think that's key. I think that's part of the reason of why I've built it the way that I have as well. Diversity is, of course, a huge component into it, but all of my research found that when children see themselves in content, they're better able to absorb that information. And when you go to hospitals, of course, that ranges, right? Not only country to country, but also within the United States, depending if it's a private, if it's public, the level of care. Are there child life specialists in that facility? Are there
Mm.
not? And I felt that a book would at least empower parents or caregivers the ability to provide that level of preparation in a way that they and their child can understand. Again, the research that I've found or that is available out there single-handedly shows that when children are better prepared for a procedure or medical situation, it doesn't mean that they're going to eliminate all of the tears or the struggles. That's still going to be there. So
Right.
this isn't just like a resolved
Mhm.
issue. It's just
Right.
simply about being honest and building a level of trust with kids instead. Instead of maybe saying something like, oh, that's not going to hurt, and that's not the case. Shots do hurt, or
Right.
stitches can hurt if you don't have the right numbing cream or procedures. And so it's really about building that level of communication and trust so that they feel empowered to understand what to expect, but also as they grow up, to advocate for themselves, to ask the right kinds of questions. And that you can see is a big cultural difference in
Mm.
the world. And we experienced that, in France, right? When our son was born, there were definitely differences in France in terms of how you communicate with the medical staff,
Yeah.
right? It might be perceived a little bit more in a hierarchical structure where it's, I'm the doctor and this is how things are done. There were certain medications, for example, that I had questions about as to why we were giving them. Um, and I feel like it depends again on the culture, and how things are received. In the US, that might range even state to state,
Oh, yeah.
hospital
City
to
to city,
hospital.
for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about, giving caregivers a tool that they can use at home to help their children. I also found that with this project, when a parent or a caregiver understands the procedure better, they are also calmer, and that creates a better champion for their child, right?
Mm.
Because children perceive things, even if we say everything is going to be okay, but we're not, we're hesitant, they pick up on that. So at least they have clarity as to, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I think that's what's the value. So,
Yeah, you and I think very much connected on like the preparation piece and the caregivers feeling like they're equipped because when you're in a state of stress as a caregiver, you're not taking in information like you normally are. Sometimes reading it in a very simple, literal way is like, oh, that's exactly what that means. Like,
exactly.
I had spent years in a hospital, and one of the things we would do as a child life specialist, I was often preparing kids for IVs. So I had um, the IV straw on my badge. And
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. Like, I'm in an elevator with other people who work at the hospital, and they're like, there's a needle on you. I'm like, that's not a needle, that's a straw. And they're like, what? So even people who work in the hospital don't always know everything. Um, okay, enough about me. Talk to me about kind of your pregnancy and leading up to finding out that something was going on with you.
Yeah. So I had a great pregnancy. Of course, I know that that varies for each woman, but my pregnancy was great. no issues. I mean, I had some nausea, but otherwise I enjoyed it. And then when Sebastian was born in France, on his second day of life, I was still in the hospital because I had to have a C-section. And he had an episode, and the episode meant that I was sitting in or lying in my bed, and I looked over at him, and he started crying, and all of a sudden became completely blue, um, and stopped making any sound. Right at the moment, I didn't wasn't perceiving that he had stopped breathing. It just he wasn't making any sound and was blue
Yeah.
and was yeah. So I picked him up in my arms and ran to the nurses station with him, and there they kept him overnight for observation. And what was very challenging for me was that the next day a doctor on call um, basically said that there was nothing wrong with him and that he looked good and that I was probably experiencing, some kind of baby blues, or some depression. So that was really challenging because as a new mom, um, I mean, I feel like all parents should trust their gut. And so you're kind of being told not to. And then you also start wondering if what you saw was actually what you saw.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, we were released shortly thereafter. And maybe a couple of days after being home, he kept doing these or having these episodes. And at one point, it was so long that my mom was in town, from Colombia, and she told me, this there's something wrong, you're right, there's something wrong. I've had 4 children, I have 7 grandchildren, I've never seen something like this.
Mm.
So I had called our pediatrician, who had also seen him, in those days before, and he told me that I needed to go to the ER with him. So I did. And during that car ride, I remember not knowing what was going on because he was asleep. But I wasn't 100% sure if he was breathing or not.
Yeah.
Um, and then after we got into the doctor's, so into a medical room for an observation or for a checkup, he actually started having them back to back, which was a terrible situation to be in,
Yeah.
but also extremely valuable because now people were seeing it, what I was
Right.
seeing. Um, and then quickly we were in a very basic kind of checkup facility and quickly moved into another one. And then we were, in a full blown OR with, I don't know, 5 doctors, 3 nurses, trying to do a spinal tap, just everything happening extremely quickly. Family members calling, nobody, not able
Yeah.
to answer anything. And of course, he was having them back to back because he was also hungry and tired. And what happens with breath holding spells, as you are aware of now, is that there's basically 2 kinds. There's the blue and the pale kind, and he was diagnosed with the blue kind. And it happens upon crying, which of course babies do.
Right. Yeah.
And it's something you cannot avoid. That's how they communicate, right? That's how they, communicate their needs, their hunger cues, they're, tired, hurt, etc. So he kept having these episodes back to back, and he had so many that his lactic acid levels were so high that it was indicative of like a breathing distress that he was going through. So it was very good that we took him to the ER. And then we were admitted into the NICU, and well, we stayed there for 3 months.
Wow.
Um, and I would say that it's a diagnosis through elimination that
Mm.
that he received for breath holding spells, or
Yeah.
spasm in French, simply because breath holding spells, usually the onset is around 6 months. And he started his second day of life. So that was already rare. And also the frequency and duration in which he had them. So on his worst day, he did it 11 times.
Mm.
Um, which means he becomes blue, stops breathing, can be anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds, sometimes longer. His heart rate and oxygen rate plummet. And then it takes about a minute or so before he comes back to his baseline. Sometimes it can take longer because when they're so small, they're not 6 months old, it takes longer for them to get to that baseline. So, in order for them to rule out, you know, other things and be sure that that's what it was, they had to do a lot of tests, right? CT scans, MRIs, sometimes multiple times in case they thought maybe they saw something, Holter, you know, EKGs, you know, everything, and endoscopy, and
Mm.
endoscopy.
Yeah.
Uh, so just lots of tests in order to rule it out, which again is very thorough. So I appreciate the fact that all of that was done over the course of 3 months. They also did blood work to rule out any possible genetic disorders that may have been there, just because of the frequency, duration, and this early onset.
Yeah.
So it was really intense.
I think about like your just journey into motherhood and how just helpless you feel and what that feels like. And being in a different country from your home country is
Yeah.
difficult. And did you speak French? Do you speak French?
I do now, but I would say that I had a very basic level of French,
Mm,
um, and I quickly learned, because in France it's not very common for, you know, a lot of the medical staff to speak in English. So in order for me to understand and also advocate for my son, I needed to learn, and I did. And it's incredible what you can accomplish
wow.
when you need to.
We'll be right back. Finding a solution to support and ease your child's daily bowel movements and improve everyday health can feel like a challenge. 30% of children struggle with constipation, and it can feel impossible trying to find a solution for your child. Especially if your child has food allergies or has a condition or illness, you want to feel good about the products you're selecting for your child. To me, finding a company whose products have the highest quality and natural ingredients is really important. Begin Health's flagship product, Growing Up Prebiotics, is a tasteless, textureless fine powder that easily mixes into water, juice, or smoothies. This makes it convenient for daily use without altering the flavor of your child's favorite beverages. You might ask yourself, what exactly does a prebiotic do? In the simplest of terms, the gut microbiome, aka bacteria, viruses, and fungi, are living organisms that are inside our intestines and on our skin. Begin Prebiotics feed these living organisms with the unique blend of human milk, oligosaccharides, HMOs, and fiber from chicory root inulin. Research has shown that the gut microbiome plays a significant role in the development of the immune system, digestion, and production of some vitamins and proteins. And get this, Begin Health's mission extends beyond nutrition, offering comprehensive resources for caregivers, including parent support groups and tools to create fun and engaging ways to get your kiddo to have smooth poos. To learn more about Begin Health's product, visit their website at beginhealth.com. And again, that's www.beginhealth.com. The growing little gut is the command center of early health, and here at Child Life On Call, we're helping to spread the word of investing in gut health positive routines starting at the earliest of ages. Child Life On Call podcast listeners get 25% off selected products, and you're definitely going to want to get the Poop Tracker game cards and stickers. You know, Child Life specialists love a good sticker. This applies to your first subscription order and one-time orders and limited to one use per customer. Head to beginhealth.com/childlifeoncall and use code childlifeoncall to get 25% off. Often I talk to medical parents and they talk about like it's basically med school condensed in a certain amount of time. And then you also have a new language to learn at that
Yeah.
time. Um, was there anyone in the hospital that did things really well in terms of communicating with you? And what were the things that were done well?
Um, I think that that was a struggle. I felt that there were a couple of nurses, that I felt let's say, seen by,
Mm.
connected with. I felt like they were hearing me. But the situation is that they're on rotation constantly, so you don't always get you often don't get the same nurse, or you'll see them a week later.
Yeah.
um, so I think that's challenging when you're in a situation, because I can think of a particular scenario where, I had spent a lot of time researching different kinds of medications or options, or what exists out there, and came across iron therapy as a potential option to reduce the number of spells. And I brought it up with one of the nurses, and she was very receptive to it and brought it up to the neurologist. And
Yeah.
then things kind of just get lost through that communication in France. The neurologist is the expert, so you don't see them as often. I had a great relationship with her as well, but I didn't see her as often as I would have liked.
Yeah.
And had to really kind of push in order for her to stop by our room. Um,
Mm.
I think that's very different in the US.
Yeah.
So you're kind of assigned um,
Yeah.
a
Right.
doctor, and that's simply how it works. I remember also there was pushback with one of the medications called Tegretol, and also one before that. Um, One before it was called salbutamol, or salbutamol.
I wouldn't know how to say
Yeah.
it at all. So,
And actually, 6 days in, he was having like full body tremors because of the medication. So there was no benefit. He wasn't having less of them because I was
mm,
tracking everything myself. I didn't really, at the moment, I didn't trust people to do it the way that I was doing it.
yeah.
And that proved helpful. With the later medication, which was called Tegretol, which is usually used in epilepsy. Or for to treat epilepsy. And there also, I found that there was no correlation between having less of these episodes and the medication, simply because what was actually occurring was that the medication was making him extremely sleepy. So he was sleeping for most of the day, which
Mm,
is why he wasn't having any episodes, because he wasn't crying.
right.
And
So
so yeah, and in this case, for example, I had I wouldn't say a conflict, but I would say a disagreement with one of the nurses there, because I said that I wanted to speak to the neurologist before continuing the next dose of this medication. And she interpreted it as I was refusing the medicine, which is not the case at all. I am, of course, not wiser then, but I had questions about its,
yeah.
efficiency, and things like that. And actually, when the neurologist came, I showed her, like, I had built out on Excel, like, or a model of the number of episodes he's had and how he was sleeping, and there was simply no correlation. And she agreed that we should actually come off this epilepsy medication, that it wasn't
Wow.
of value. And at the same time said something like, well, they should have been monitoring or tracking this as well. So even though you are, Necker is one of the best hospitals in France. It's great. I'm very, very grateful for everything. But even though you are in a great place or facility, parents do know their children, even if they're very young. And we do have gut instinct, and we do know, and it's okay to ask questions and to push back. I think you can do so in a very polite way, right? I don't want to, encourage people to fight with nurses or doctors, not at all. But I think that you can find a balance in advocating and pushing for questions, and not just, I can see how someone with a different personality, which is also very infuriating, would have
Yeah.
just continued giving the medication
Right.
to their child, or you know yeah. So
I have I'm just kind of thinking about you don't you go into parenthood knowing that you're going to be your child's advocate right for the beginning of it, but you don't realize, especially in medical and healthcare situations, what actually may be required of you to record and remember and jot down. And we always err on the side of doing more than less. It's like the whole reason we have a journal section in Support Spot is to track symptoms, track pain, write down questions for the doctor, because what you notice, what you observe is going to be with more intention and sometimes accuracy because of the simple fact you know this child better and you're there all the time. Um, but that's incredibly overwhelming. And I'm sure that you felt that on you. For parents who are listening now, when did you finally, and have you gotten to the place of finding a reprieve from that level of stress
Yeah.
that you have to be the person to look at it all?
Yeah. Um, Definitely. I would say that had I known that your app existed, then I would have used that. I was using some other kind, I don't actually remember, some other kind of healthcare
Yeah,
app, but
whatever works.
it wasn't exactly what I needed, but it was enough for me to jot down. I think,
Yeah.
what was occurring. I think that one wonderful thing that they did in France was, after I was released from the NICU, they let me move into general pediatrics for a week and a half,
Mm,
and that was really incredible because that was our first time without living with, monitoring and cables, and it was almost like they were allowing me to stay there
yeah.
under their care and observation so that I could feel safe
Yeah.
while learning to live not tracking his heart and oxygen rate, you know,
Yeah.
which was incredible to have that. I would say that I tracked everything probably for, I would say, 5 or 6 months. And then I decided one day that I was not going to track anything anymore, for my own sanity, because it
Yeah.
becomes a bit overwhelming. Like, how many seconds was that? And were they shorter? Were they less? How many did he
Yeah.
have today? So at one point, I felt, let's say, comfortable enough with what his diagnosis was, that it was accurate. I felt comfortable enough that I had seen so many now that I knew what to do, or felt that I
Mm,
knew how to handle it, that I allowed myself to kind of breathe, let go. This is our life. This is how we
yeah.
are going to live. And I'm not going to continue tracking
Yeah.
this. I think it depends, of course, with you know, what diagnosis you have or what you're dealing with breath holding spells. What we know little about how they're caused or why, but what we do know is that they don't tend to cause any long term, let's say, effects. So even though they're
Yeah.
terrifying and scary to watch, he always came to and always came back to baseline. And I
Mm,
knew that, even though it was hard to remember at some of these longer ones, even when he's was 4 years old, right?
yeah. Yeah. Do they continue past infancy?
No, so what's wonderful, or this is, the funny way to talk about medical stuff, but what's wonderful, or the silver lining in this condition, is that they do tend to outgrow it, right? So
Mm,
usually the sweet spot is between 4 and 6 years old. So our son is 5 now, and I mean, he had a micro one, I would call, maybe 3 months ago.
yeah.
The other day he fell and got, 6 stitches,
Oh,
and I thought
no.
sure he was gonna have one. But see, but you, I mean, we're thinking
Y
something else, and
yeah.
he didn't
Yeah.
even have, he cried with all you can imagine,
Yeah.
but he didn't have an episode. So
Wow.
you do come out of it, right? And that's what
Yeah.
you just have to keep telling yourself. I mean, we went from 11 on a bad day to, occasional ones every now and then.
Mhm.
And actually, I can sometimes see when other kids are having them when they fall. You might sometimes notice, a kid kind of just blocks, and
Yeah.
then they stop crying, and
Does
sometimes
he does he notice them? Does he feel them?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is one thing that I would recommend as well to parents that may have a similar situation, is to be honest about what's happening. Since Sebastian was a newborn, I would basically narrate what was happening to him. So I would tell him, "You're having, a breath holding spell. You need to breathe. I
Yeah.
love you. You're safe. You need to breathe." And I kept doing that, and I kept doing that, because I think that even when they're older, they know what's happening. It's involuntary, of course, but they know that there's something happening in their body. And when they're coming back as well, I think it's important to be comforting and calm, so that they come back to, when they're coming back
Yeah.
to the baseline, that you're offering a comfortable, safe, calming place. It is not easy, because your
Yeah.
heart also, drops, and you feel sick sometimes. I mean, I remember sometimes even shouting out for help, right? Because it was
Right.
just too long.
Right.
And I think, just keeping in mind, telling yourself, that he or she will breathe, um, and trying to remember what to do, which is been recommended, is to kind of make sure that they're lying flat so that they can get more oxygen flow. Don't shake them, blow into their face, tell them to breathe. Um, and I know that we've discussed that there was a video of another child that another pediatrician shared, which
Yeah.
I would recommend people to see if they've had a child with breath holding, or if they are curious about it, because it is quite an impact to see.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's what I would.
Yeah.
And
We'll definitely link to that for people to watch because I think you're right. Being able to see what it looks like and identify it, and your calming presence to your son. Like I love it's almost like you're doing a mantra for him to get him back, but it's also working for you too.
100%, 100%.
um and I would love for you to share a little bit about what Prep Me Kids is for. And I find your experience and the way you articulate what you went through so powerful, and that you still see the benefits of preparing kids at older ages. And when you started this project, Sebastian was still very little, right? And now
Yeah.
you're actually putting into practice what preparing him for experiences can do. And where can people get a Prep Me Kid book, and how can they use it?
Yeah. I mean, I think just to conclude with the breath holding as well, is that one of the recommendations would be as well, is to prepare them for transitions, right? Which you do with children, but with kids with breath holding spells, I'd take it that extra step, right? If we were going to the zoo one day, we would tell him the night before, we're planning on going to the zoo. Animals make these kinds of sounds. Preps, again, sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. When he was much older and we felt comfortable taking our first flight, we took a flight to Florida. I took him on an airboat, for example. That was a terrible idea for a child with my condition. I had shown him a video beforehand. I told him they're very loud. He loves crocodiles or alligators. I can't remember now. Um, and the airboat was so loud that it terrified him, and he kept having them on the boat, but there was no way to even tell the driver, they can't hear you. So I would say that just preparing for transitions is vital, and that's what brought me into Prep Me Kids. It started with the fact that we were trying to transition him to sleep in his own crib, and it was a struggle for me, because as most children cry when you're trying to, let's say, sleep train, we were avoiding all of that for a very long time. He was
Yeah.
2 years old, and I breastfed for a very long time, in hopes of reaping all the benefits that I could think of. And
Right.
it just became too much. And I prepared a good night book for him, explaining to him what each evening would look like for his bedtime, and it was personalized to him. And I found that I started reading it a week before we were going to begin this transition. It was challenging. He did have these episodes, but we stuck to it. which is also an important point with breath holding spells, is to still stick to
Right.
um, these boundaries, right? So I think that we focus a lot on gentle parenting, but with firm boundaries. A
Right.
car seat is non negotiable, even if you're going to have these episodes.
Right.
Um, and sleeping in your own bed is also in our home a non negotiable
Right.
sort of situation. And then after that, I kind of started thinking back at and to our hospital experience and how I wished that there had been, some kind of preparation tool, even when he was older, to talk about this was what you were diagnosed, this is what happens to you. And then, of course, I started considering all the children that go for medical procedures and how there's such discrepancies between the level of medical care, not only country to country, state to state, depending on levels of funds and that sort of
Right.
thing, and insurance coverage, etc. And that brought me to developing books for the most common surgeries for children at the moment. So we have, for example, Oscar's tonsillectomy. You can customize the child, and on the platform. So I created a platform. You customize the whole procedure for the child. So why they're having their tonsillectomy, it can be a variety of factors. We also have a hernia repair, which is also common, and you can, select the type of hernia that they're having repaired, how they might feel, what to pack the night before. There's a lot of, talk about your feelings. And it's all very accurate, medically focused, a lot of research, but also the colorful illustrations are approachable to children, so
Hmm.
they can have trust with their caregiver as well about reading through the material. We also have a ear tube placement and an allergy series that's coming out soon to help children with allergies, like existing allergies that have been diagnosed, but also for an allergy test, because there's a variety of different kinds of tests. There's, prick and
Yeah.
scratch and blood tests and all kinds of different things. So it's really about giving that power to families and children and trying to make it a little bit more, let's say, equitable kind of preparation.
I think that's so perfect. And the fact that you can go in and customize, and I've seen the platform, it's so easy to use. It couldn't be more user friendly. You choose everything from the name, but it's not like I have to put that much work into it. It's like I can choose from A, B, and C, and because of research, what A, B, and C are the most likely common thing. Anyway, it's so user friendly. They're beautiful books. And I feel so confident in what you've done, and I'm so
Thanks.
grateful to learn about it and, support you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Well, it's also great to have, someone like yourself with a medical background also having reviewed the books, and giving feedback, right? Which is
yeah,
one of the first reasons that you and I kind of connected as well, was because I
mm,
was interested in your input.
yeah,
I would say that I was following you in the shadows to see if we felt aligned in our missions and things like that. And I would say that 100% that that's the case.
yeah,
And so I appreciate a lot your feedback as well, on the books and the
yeah.
material.
Oh, of course. And, it wasn't really until our conversation today I knew your story a little bit, but you essentially have been parenting a child who every time they cry, they don't breathe.
Yeah,
Like, just take a minute for how
yeah,
difficult that is and, like, how that weighs on you. And the fact that you have turned it into a project to help others is just incredible, because it would have been so easy to just be selfish and in your own world and say, I had to deal with this and now but you didn't do that. And Sebastian's very lucky to have you as his mom.
thank you. Thanks so.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So where can we follow you and get the books?
So you can get the books on our platform, which is just www. I don't even think people say www
Yeah,
anymore.
I know.
PrepMeKids.com, and you can follow us on Instagram as well, PrepMeKids. And yeah, I hope also the main goal is, of course, to make a difference and help kids feel better prepared, right?
Mm.
So would love to see it help some people.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Katie.
You guys, I have the best news. If you didn't hear it at the beginning of the episode, Support Spot, our app, is now available for every parent. You no longer need a hospital code to log in. So go ahead and go to childlifeoncall.com/supportspot and download our app today. Hospitals and child life specialists, yes, we are still partnering with you if you want to customize content or provide this app to your families free of charge. We're so grateful that you're here. When you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that, and I will see you again here next week. Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.